So I think there's a big need for community in the world right now. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was Kundalini awakenings. I think that it can be a very lonely experience when it comes to not being able to relate to people. So if you found this video and maybe you're having a Kundalini awakening and you're looking for resources, I think you came to the right place. In a little bit, I'm going to talk about some resources from an expert, not from myself. So I'm not saying I'm an expert in Kundalini awakenings. I have had my own personal experience. And so I'm going to start with that story of my personal experience. And then I want to talk about the resources that are out there, in particular Bonnie Greenwell, who was a mentor of mine, so to speak. And I'm going to share some resources in a little bit about kind of really truly what a Kundalini awakening is. And then on top of that, ways that you can smooth out the experience and you can rest into this new way of being. Because obviously, if you've had a Kundalini awakening and you're here at this channel, there's a good chance that, you may be a little bit scared and a little bit uncertain and a little bit, could be a little bit freaked out like me, or in the same, you could be incredibly blissful, incredibly ungrounded. And so there's a huge gamut of where you can lie. And so I'll start off with my story. And so it was in 2017, I was at the Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington, D.C., and I was there for a routine eye appointment, really just to see how my eyes were doing. And in a previous visit, I had an x-ray of my eye with a machine to see kind of what was going on, because I had been talking about blurry vision. And come to find out, the doctor, he walks into the room. He has this, really long face, and he's like, so there's something wrong with your eyes. I think that I'm not an expert, but I believe that you may have something called central serous retinopathy. And I had no idea what that was. And he kind of explained, and he said, we'll introduce you to someone from the National Institute of Health. He's more of a subject matter expert in this, but really what it is it's a leakage of fluid in the retina or underneath the retina that essentially causes scarring on the eye and can lead to pretty significant vision loss. And at the time I was having blurry vision. And so, of course, I freak out a little bit. And to be honest, I was really in a dark place at the time. And just, it was one of those times where I think I was in this victim consciousness mode. And so after that day, I did take the day off. Or after that appointment, I took the day off, and I actually had an appointment that I made with a hypnotherapist in Washington, D.C. And so I went to that appointment, and I remember going to it thinking like, you know what, just go home, shit's really bad, and talk to your girlfriend. And at the same time, I wanted to be alone and just be left alone. So, but I thought, hey, I booked this appointment. And the reason why I booked the appointment to begin with is because honestly, I had this chip on my shoulder. I was an angry young man. I really wasn't that young. I was 33 at the time. I still think that's a young man. And so I went to get this chip off my shoulder. And I remember getting there, and the hypnotherapist, she's this sweet lady named Rita, and I believe she's still there in Washington, D.C. And she talked to me about, and she showed me a video about perception and how our reality is created by this distorted perception based on, really what we're seeing. We really don't see a lot of the world. And I remember thinking, okay, this video is really cool, but hey, let's get into like the meat of why I'm here. Let's do my hypnosis session. And so we go into the session, and she puts headphones on me. She's got headphones on herself with a little speaker. And they say, ignorance is bliss. And I think that there's absolute truth in that. So I really didn't know much about the hypnotherapy. And she does her induction, and before I know it, I'm out like a light. And however many minutes go by, I would probably guess maybe 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. I hear the door open, and she's coming in there, and I also have headphones. I still have the headphones on, and I'm listening to a recording. And the first thing in my mind was, why am I listening to a recording when, the hypnotherapist is supposed to be the one giving me hypnotherapy? And so she comes in, and she gets back on the mic, and she brings me out of, the hypnosis trance. And then I realized, okay, well, the hypnosis session took place, and she just put a recording on after she did her thing. And she said, you went really, really deep. to unconscious place. And so I put this music on, I let you be, because I knew you were incredibly receptive. And at the same time, she took a long time to sort of bring me back out of that unconscious state. And so it's not common to have those experiences, I don't think, but I think I was so ignorant to it that I really went unconscious. Generally with hypnosis, you stay conscious and you're aware of everything. But for me in that experience, I went unconscious. And all I can remember was seeing this picture of a boat in my mind. And I really, to be honest, thought I just went to sleep. I was like, this is BS. Doesn't even work. And I left there kind of going back into my stupor of self-pity of what had happened and what I'd heard about at the hospital with my eye. And so I went home and I talked to my girlfriend. I said, hey, I'd like to be asleep. I'd like to be alone for a little bit and meditate. And would you please go to your girlfriend's house and just, let me be? And that's my personality. Sometimes I think when I'm processing things, it's important to have community, but for me, sometimes I need to be alone. And she left. And so I decided to do some meditation. And during that meditation, I'd been doing meditation, I think now for like 4 or 5 years. And I went into my normal practice. And then during it, as my eyes are closed, I see this flash like whew, across my eyes, almost like, a sunset over the ocean or an old TV screen shutting off. And I open my eyes and I say, my thoughts become things. I'm not a victim of circumstance. I'm the creator of my reality. And out of nowhere, I had that realization. It was the second time that I had an epiphany, and I realized it was an epiphany because it was something, that realization, it came into my mind, but didn't come through my thinking mind. And it was something that I knew to be true within every cell of my body. And so within an instance, I went from this victim consciousness to understanding that I'm the creator of my reality. I'm not the victim of circumstance. And it really just shifted everything in my being in an instant. And so at this moment, I'm kind of feeling really blissful. I don't really know what's going on. But I certainly had a deep shift with this epiphany and this realization. And a couple hours later, my girlfriend comes home and I'm having a hard time sleeping. And I'd say for the past maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I was waking up between 3 and 4 in the morning. But this particular night, I had that epiphany and I felt to have all this like energy bubbling up in me. And so I went for a walk. And at the time I lived in Roslyn, Virginia. And so what I did was walk across the Key Bridge, which is the bridge that connects Arlington, Virginia to Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And I just went for the walk. And I remember thinking, and actually saying out loud, I can remember it, thinking, I am one with the universe. Everything is one. And just feeling this immense bliss. And to be truthful, I was incredibly ungrounded. But in the corner of my eye, I look over and I see this boat in the water. And so I think to myself, I'm pretty sure that's what I saw during the hypnosis session. So I end up following the bridge and going down to the water, seeing the boat. But in the corner of my eye, as I look to the boat, I see this sign. And I see this weird little figure, this like circular figure. And I walk up to it. And it was a sign, and it was a labyrinth sign, and it said an ancient meditation path. And I read this sign, and it says, pause, take a moment to relax and reflect. And then it says, the journey in, release concerns and quiet the mind. The center, receive what this moment offers. The journey out, review and reflect. And lastly, it says, exit, carry this experience into your life. And so after I read this, I sat down on a park bench, and it actually said open spaces, sacred places on the bench. And so I'm sort of thinking like, this is just all this craziness is happening. I'm like, I'm feeling excited. But again, I kind of close my mind and I'm thinking, okay, just relax and reflect. And then I end up walking the path and I walked to the center, put my hands down off to my side and sort of just, again, feeling one with the universe, incredibly blissful. Years later, I find out that ancient meditation paths or labyrinth paths, which labyrinth mazes, are actually meditation paths that are designed in a way that you walk them, that it helps the mind transcend And of course, I didn't know that at that time. And anyway, I had this experience and I'm feeling just overwhelmed with bliss. And I go home and I recall, still having a hard time falling asleep, but I believe I fell asleep for probably about an hour. And I remember when I woke up, everything looked different, everything sounded different, and I was incredibly ungrounded. And I remember my girlfriend just thinking, like, he's lost his mind, like he's acting crazy. And I was talking about the universe, and of course, I had been spiritual for many years, not many years, but a few years before that, had very much interest in more esoteric things. But this was an overwhelming shift that happened just like that. And for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I was having a Kundalini awakening, but I still, for the first week, didn't know what was going on. And so my friends and family were like, this guy, whoo. But the nice thing was that I was able to take 3 weeks off of work because I had that eye disease. So I actually had some sick leave that I could use for that eye issue that I had. So a blessing in disguise. But it wasn't until about a week later, when I was a week later after I had that experience with the epiphany, and also at the Labyrinth meditation path, that I was texting my little brother, and he says, I think you had a Kundalini awakening, man. And so I looked that up and I'm like, Kundalini awakening, what the hell is that? And I see all these things and I almost like dropped my phone and I'm thinking, yeah, this is exactly what I had. And it created this rush of fear and all these stories in my mind. And push came to shove. This is when, I think fear sort of kind of crept into my mind. And that's the information that I'm going to be sharing with you. A couple days after that, I was introduced to Bonnie Greenwell, who my old boss, who's a psychologist. I told her about the experience, and very luckily, I had the ability to trust someone, because I think that when you have a Kundalini awakening, it's very difficult to feel like who you can trust, because those individuals are going to think you're losing your mind, because there's such a radical shift. And obviously there's this primordial energy that's bubbling up from your spine. It's absolutely a normal part of evolution. However, in some contexts, it may be misunderstood, and very much you may be feeling alone or sort of scared when it happens. And so I'm going to be sharing with you some resources from Bonnie Greenwell. I ended up, again, my boss, who's a psychologist, said, I think you should meet with Bonnie Greenwell. She's an expert in Kundalini awakenings, and she did her PhD dissertation in it. And she's also this transpersonal psychologist that she'll meet with you, and she will really kind of help you out with the beginnings of this experience. And for lack of better terms, I think I was almost having a spiritual crisis for sure. And being hooked up with Bonnie Greenwell, an expert, was incredibly beneficial. And so I think it'll be helpful to go over some of her resources on her website. All right, so I want to introduce you to a resource that I think is a really, really authentic one that helps me when I had my initial Kundalini awakening in 2017. It's important to note that during this process, you are absolutely your own guru. The process is going to be very different for different individuals. It can be incredibly blissful at times. It can be scary at times. It could be overwhelming at times. And so I think sometimes it's really nice to have a resource to rely on. And so for me, I had Bonnie Greenwell. I met with her, and she is a transpersonal psychologist who actually dedicated her life to the research of Kundalini. And so she had her own Kundalini awakening, and she went on to become a transpersonal psychologist, where she actually met with, I think, over 2,000 individuals one-on-one to have sessions to help them deal with some of the difficulties they may have or the spiritual crises that may emerge. And so she had this transpersonal psychology background mixed with her deep research. And what makes her incredibly unique and an absolute expert in Kundalinis is that her Kundalini awakenings is that her PhD was specifically on Kundalini awakenings. And I believe her first book, which you can find on here, was actually her dissertation being published. And so again, just a great resource. And I'm going to put in the link below this website for you to check out. But I want to walk you through some of it, because if you are experiencing this right now, it can be a beautiful experience, but as I said, it can be an overwhelming experience for sure. And so what Bonnie Greenwell says here is that, this website's designed, or Kundalini is designed to help you understand the life-changing dynamics of a Kundalini awakening. This website's designed to do that. And it introduces you to her research and her teachings. And she mentions here that Kundalini may activate for many reasons. Could be through breath work, it could be through meditation, it could be through an accident. And she goes on to say that these heightened vibrations and energy commonly move through the body when someone has reached a certain point of readiness in their spiritual or energy practices. And so it seems to function as a clearing process as the identity shifts into a new perspective. And so she points out right there that it's a natural part of evolution that you have reached, and it's actually quite a blessing on your path to higher states of consciousness. And it's that you've reached a certain point, perhaps in your incarnations, to have this energy release. And as she mentions, and I mentioned already, it could awake for a lot of different reasons. Injury could be something traumatic, could be a highly emotional event. It could be a deep devotion to a higher power, to God, or an encounter with a person who transmits this intensified energy. I mentioned my story, and I think that I had a bit of suffering going on, and most likely that hypnosis session probably tapped into this deeper energy that released. And so she goes on to say, just use this as a great guide, this website. Here, this is probably what I think one of the most beautiful resources here. What is Kundalini? And she says that Kundalini is a Sanskrit term from the ancient India that identifies the rising of an energy and consciousness, which has been coiled at the base of the spine since birth, and it's a source of life. It's the life force. So it's that pranic energy, that chi, if you're talking in Chinese medicine, or that bioenergy that everyone knows about. And yogic science suggests that this energy has triggered the formations of the child in the womb, and then coils 3.5 times at the base of the spine to hold the energy field in a stasis until we die, when it uncoils and returns to its source. And for those that have a Kundalini awakening, it actually is activated before you die, obviously, and that's most likely what brought you to this video. And it goes on to say a bunch of really helpful, and I would say, in my opinion, the most accurate description of what Kundalini awakening can do. And here I'll point out, this is an interesting one, is that Kundalini awakening, it offers a profound opportunity for those to follow a spiritual path, and it gradually releases many patterns, conditions, and delusions of the separate self. And so for me, I could definitely say that I was always trying to seek the truth. What I mean by that is, what's the truth of reality? I was born into a Roman Catholic faith, which was absolutely beautiful, but there were aspects of it that I challenged, and I always asked the question, to God and to the universe, was, what's the truth of reality? I really, really want to know. And so that seems to be a profound opportunity, as it mentions, to walk that spiritual path. And there may be opportunities or something that arises where you really want to have a thirst for knowledge. So for myself, I went on to get a master's in consciousness and human potential, Vedic science, through Maharishi International University, and I was just very thirsty for knowledge. And so Maharishi Mahesh Yogi became one of my gurus, who I never met, passed away years ago. Adyashanti is another one who I was introduced actually by Bonnie Greenwell. And so as it mentions, for those that are called to follow a spiritual path, it really broadens that, and it really can be, again, quite altering in your perspective and in your shift in how you see things. And it goes on to say a couple other things there that I think you'll find interesting to check out. Now, I also want to point you to the essays. Obviously, there's a bunch of other stuff on here, and I should say that I have zero affiliation with Bonnie as far as anything goes monetarily. I'm just sharing information, and as I mentioned, Bonnie passed away. I just have a deep respect for her and I don't want to steal any of her teachings. I want to share them with you. Here's one. Helpful response to initial awakening. I think this is what I wanted to walk through with you. So it says, if you are experiencing, the Kundalini awakening right now, and it's something that you're fearful about, the first thing it says here is that, be curious instead of fearful. That's a new experience and somewhat similar to the chaos of going through puberty. So the difference is that everyone understands the function of puberty. However, only a few understand the transformation of Kundalini. And so, as with everything in life, just be curious and open. Another one is accept it. Remember, all resistance to what is enhances suffering. So trying to accept it as it is. It does go on to mention having trouble resting. I think that is something that can arise. You may need less rest, and you may also feel like you can't sleep. It's because your wiring, as I think the website points out, it can go from, let's say, 50 wiring to 200 miles per hour type wiring, and so you may have a need for less sleep. Goes on to say, be in tune with your deepest desire for truth. Don't make a drama out of this or give it undue attention. The changes are simply going to occur, and so it's a process of just embracing, and it's really a process of unbecoming. It's not that you're adding anything to yourself. What you're really doing is this unconscious energy. It's coming to the surface to work its way through your chakras and to really uncover the truth of who and what you are, and to take the higher and lower self and close that gap and really allow you to understand the truth of reality. And so it's definitely something that's a natural phenomenon and nothing that needs to be afraid of. The common problem here, it says, is insomnia. And it says, if the energy keeps you awake at night, try to find some napping time during the day. And I do recall this being very helpful for myself. Again, it was 2017. And at the time of this video, it's October 2024. And so I remember actually for the first 2 weeks, literally not sleeping at all because I couldn't. I just had so much energy. It also felt like Christmas, and I was incredibly ungrounded. And so I would sleep kind of out of exhaustion during the day. I would just fall asleep in the grass. And that was a grounding experience. And I think another thing to point out is that there's so much energy and you're at a new vibration. And so you're really going to want to spend some time grounding that energy. And I think there are some meditations in this website that can help you do that as well. It says to avoid all intoxicants and stimulants. I think this is incredibly helpful. Your nervous system is really, truly getting rewired. And so I can remember literally taking an Allegra or an allergy pill and my whole body just being like, what is in my system? It was so sensitive. And so I think that's a great point. Things like marijuana, alcohol, you're going to be very, very sensitive to that stuff. And so you're your own guru. You do you for sure. But if you find yourself having any issues in particular, avoiding intoxicants and stimulants like caffeine and so on and so forth can certainly be helpful. But again, I think the most important thing to realize about this experience is that you need to lean into your own truth and be your own guru in this process. And then here it says, find someone who will support you and is willing to hold a broad and calm perspective about what you're experiencing. I think that's a tough thing as well. You may find yourself in a situation where your family doesn't understand you. And that can be something that is tough. That's maybe why you found yourself here, because you're looking for a resource. And a lot of folks, you may literally Google Kundalini and you're going to find Kundalini yoga, but you may not find the resources you're looking for. And it's not something that you're going to see people openly talk about. But as I realized as time went on, it's more common than I thought. It's not actually enlightenment. It's the beginning of the process towards enlightenment. So I think there's a period in time where I'm like, I'm enlightened. There's all this blissful energy. And as time went on and I grounded myself, I realized, well, this is actually the beginning of a beautiful journey and certainly not the end. But I do think there is help in community. And so this can be a resource
videos like you're watching now can be a resource, and finding people that you truly trust that you can talk to. I think that a lot of folks out there, it might be hard to turn to your brother, your mother that have never had this experience, or your pastor at your church. Obviously, at work and things like that, it can be very, very tough. And so, sharing your energy and your thoughts and this perspective with people that you know you can open your heart to, and give you a calm perspective, and most importantly, give you a non-judgmental perspective slash holding space for you is important. And lastly, here I'll just mention, it says, be welcoming. You are touching your true nature. You can't get away from it, so dance with it. Understand this process supports a true awakening. And it says to read the Awakening Guide for a deeper understanding of where it's going. And so, I just wanted to share this resource. I think that's a beautiful way to end it. That you're touching your true nature, and slowly but surely releasing old patterns, and hopefully aligning the higher self with the lower self, and combining and creating a more coherency in your body. And so, hope you found this video helpful. And again, this resource will be below. And I wish you all the best and many blessings until the next video.